The Golden Age kicked off in 1939 when publisher Martin Goodman launched Timely Publications, the company that would eventually become Marvel. Comic books were exploding in popularity thanks to Superman and Batman over at DC, and Timely wanted in. Their first big hit came in Marvel Comics issue 1, which introduced two characters that would become early icons: the original Human Torch, an android that bursts into flames, and Namor the Submariner, Marvel's first anti-hero and angry king of Atlantis. This was Marvel's first step into the superhero game, and it worked. The book sold like crazy. In 1949, Joe Simon and Jack Kirby gave us Captain America, and he instantly became Timely's flagship character. Cap's debut cover is legendary. He's literally punching Hitler in the face months before the US even entered World War II. His stories were pure patriotic power fantasy, and they were exactly what readers wanted. Millions of copies sold, and Cap wasn't just a character. He was a symbol of what Timely Comics was all about: standing up to evil when the world needed it most. During World War II, superhero comics were everywhere. Captain America, Human Torch, and Namor fought Nazis and supervillains on the front lines and at home. Timely pumped out dozens of titles, and superhero comics were so popular they felt unstoppable. Cap even got two sidekicks, Bucky Barnes and the lesser-known Golden Girl. For a while, Timely was riding high and competing with DC for superhero dominance. But when the war ended, the superhero craze started to die off. Readers moved on to other genres like horror, crime, romance, and westerns, and superheroes didn't seem as exciting without Nazis to punch. By the late 1940s, sales dropped hard. Captain America was cancelled in 1950, and Timely shifted to what people wanted, like spooky horror books, romance comics, and funny animal stories. The superheroes that built the company basically vanished for a decade. This period is sometimes called the Atlas era, since Timely was rebranded as Atlas Comics in the 1950s. Instead of superhero teams, you had giant monster comics with names like Fin Fang Foom, Groot, yes, that Groot long before Guardians of the Galaxy, and tons of sci-fi anthology books. These weren't bad comics. Some were incredibly creative, but they were completely different from the superhero-heavy world Timely started with. It's almost like Marvel hit the reset button and tried every genre they could to stay alive. Even though superheroes were basically gone, the Golden Age laid the foundation for what was coming. Captain America, Namor, and the Human Torch were Marvel's first shared universe characters, and that idea would come back in a huge way in the 1960s. Many of the creative teams that cut their teeth in the Golden Age, including Stan Lee, who started at Timely as a teenage assistant, would later lead the charge in the Marvel Silver Age. The Marvel Age, aka the Silver Age. The Silver Age for Marvel really begins with Fantastic Four issue 1 in 1961. Stan Lee and Jack Kirby reinvented the superhero formula by ditching the perfect, godlike heroes of DC and giving us a team that argued, bickered, and had real problems. Reed Richards, Sue Storm, Johnny Storm, and Ben Grimm weren't just a superhero team. They were a family. Marvel's first family. They didn't wear masks, they lived in the public eye, and their adventures were as much about drama as they were about fighting cosmic threats. This book set the tone for everything Marvel would do next. Then came Spider-Man in Amazing Fantasy issue 15 in 1962, and he completely changed the game. Peter Parker was just a teenager dealing with bullies, bad luck, and homework, plus supervillains. He wasn't a sidekick, he was the lead hero in his own book, and readers related to him instantly. This everyman hero approach became Marvel's secret weapon. Suddenly, superheroes could have range problems, love triangles, and existential crises, and fans loved it. In the span of a few years, Marvel unleashed Thor, Iron Man, Hulk, Daredevil, X-Men, and Doctor Strange. Each character brought something unique. Thor gave us Norse mythology, Iron Man explored technology and Cold War fears, Hulk was a modern-day Frankenstein, and Doctor Strange opened the door to mind-bending magic. The best part? They all existed in the same shared world, characters crossed over all the time, and that made the Marvel Universe feel alive and connected in a way no other publisher was doing. Marvel took things even further by forming the Avengers in 1963, a dream team of heroes that brought Thor, Iron Man, Hulk, Ant-Man, and the Wasp together to fight threats too big for any one hero. Soon after came the X-Men, a team of young mutants fighting for acceptance in a world that feared them. And this was where Marvel really leaned into allegory, using mutants as a metaphor for racism, prejudice, and social struggles. These team books became a massive hit and made Marvel's universe feel like one giant interconnected story. What really set the Silver Age apart was Marvel's focus on real-life issues. Characters argued, made mistakes, and grew over time. Spider-Man worried about money, money, Iron Man dealt with his heart condition and later alcoholism, and the X-Men faced bigotry. Marvel wasn't afraid to be topical. They addressed things like the space race, nuclear war anxiety, and even touched on drugs in a way that shocked the Comics Code Authority. It made their comics feel more grounded and modern than anything else on the stands. By 1970, Marvel was a completely different company than it was a decade earlier. Stan Lee had become a celebrity. Jack Kirby was pushing for bigger, wilder ideas, and readers were now invested in character development, not just action. When Kirby left for DC in 1970, it marked the symbolic end of the Silver Age, but the foundation was set. Marvel had transformed from a small publisher into a pop culture powerhouse, and the next era would only get bolder and darker. The Bronze Age, aka the grittier Marvel. The 1970s kicked off a major shift for Marvel. The Comics Code Authority, the group that censored comics, started loosening its rules, and Marvel took full advantage. Suddenly we could have more violence, scarier monsters, and more real-world drama. Stories weren't just about good guys beating bad guys anymore. They tackled drugs, politics, and morality. This was Marvel growing up, and it showed in every corner of their comics. This era gave us one of the most shocking moments in Marvel history, the death of Gwen Stacy in Amazing Spider-Man 121 in 1973. Up until then, major characters almost never stayed dead, and killing Spider-Man's girlfriend shook readers to the core. It marked the moment Marvel made it clear that heroes wouldn't always save the day. Sometimes they'd fail, and it would hurt. This one event basically set the tone for the entire Bronze Age. Marvel also introduced some of its grittiest, most popular characters during this time. Wolverine slashed his way into the Incredible Hulk, issue 180 and issue 181. The Punisher debuted as a brutal vigilante in Amazing Spider-Man issue 129, and Ghost Rider roared onto the scene with his flaming skull and demonic deal. These characters were more morally complex than the clean-cut heroes of the past. They killed, they fought dirty, and they were fan favorites. And this was also the era where Marvel's cosmic storytelling exploded. Thanos made his debut along with the Infinity Gems, Adam Warlock's space sagas, and some truly epic battles that stretched across the galaxy. Jim Starlin was doing wild, psychedelic cosmic stories that pushed the boundaries of superhero comics. And these stories would later inspire some of the biggest events in the MCU. The Bronze Age also leaned hard into social issues. Green Goblin Reborn dealt with Harry Osborn's drug addiction, Falcon became Marvel's first African-American superhero with his own series, and Luke Cage was created to tap into blaxploitation craze and became a symbol of urban heroism. Even X-Men, relaunched under writer Chris Claremont, became a powerful metaphor for prejudice and civil rights, and introduced Storm, Colossus, Nightcrawler, and Wolverine to the team, creating the X-Men lineup we know today. By the mid-1980s, Marvel had gone through a creative renaissance. Storylines were more complex, characters were more human, and fans were more emotionally invested than ever. The Dark Phoenix saga showed just how tragic superhero stories could get, while Secret Wars became Marvel's first major event crossover. The Bronze Age ended with Marvel ready to embrace even darker, edgier storytelling in the next era. The extreme and experimental era. The mid-1980s flipped the switch on superhero comics. Marvel dove headfirst into darker, riskier storytelling. Secret Wars 1984 was Marvel's first huge crossover event, throwing dozens of heroes and villains onto Battleworld to fight for survival. Not long after, Craven's Last Hunt delivered a psychologically intense Spider-Man story that proved Marvel wasn't afraid to go dark. This era started asking tougher questions about morality, debt, and what being a hero really cost. The late 80s and early 90s were a golden time for massive, multi-issue sagas. Cosmic Marvel was firing on all cylinders with Infinity Gauntlet, which gave us the Mad Titan Thanos snapping half the universe out of existence. Meanwhile, the X-Men hit peak popularity with the Dark Phoenix saga, Days of Future Past, and Age of Apocalypse. These weren't just superhero fights, they were high-stakes epics that defined Marvel for a generation. This is the era where gritty anti-heroes became the coolest thing in comics. Wolverine went from being just an X-Men member to Marvel's most popular character. The Punisher got multiple solo series where he gunned down mobsters by the dozen. Even Venom, born as Spider-Man's terrifying enemy, became a lethal protector and fan favorite. Heroes were angrier, darker, and bloodier than ever, and fans ate it up. Then came the 90s, and with it, the extreme era of comics. Bigger muscles, bigger guns, pouches everywhere, and shiny foil covers that collectors couldn't resist. Spider-Man got the infamous Clone Saga, and the X-Men became Marvel's top-selling title, and characters like Deadpool, Cable, and Carnage became breakout stars. everything was louder and more over the top, which made the comics fun, but also a little ridiculous at times. Unfortunately, the 90s comic boom came with a price. Publishers overproduced issues, hoping collectors would buy them all, and the market crashed. Marvel filed for bankruptcy in 1996, and for a while it looked like the company might not survive. But during this tough time, Marvel experimented like crazy, trying new imprints like Marvel Knights and darker takes like Marvels by Kurt Busiek and Alex Ross, which reminded readers why they loved these heroes in the first place. Despite the chaos, this era planted the seeds for the Marvel we know today. Blade's 1998 movie proved Marvel characters could work on the big screen. Kevin Feige was just starting to get involved in Marvel's film projects behind the scenes, and by the late 90s, Marvel was ready to reinvent itself for a new century, with the Ultimate Universe and a fresh creative direction just around the corner. The Rebuilding Era, aka Marvel Knights and Ultimate Universe era. So by the late 90s, Marvel had just crawled out of bankruptcy and desperately needed a new direction. Fans were burned out on endless gimmicks, crossovers, and Halo event comics, so Marvel focused on making better comics rather than just more comics. This is where the Marvel Knights imprint came in, and it was the perfect fresh start. Gritty, mature, and driven by strong creative voices. Marvel Knights brought characters like Daredevil, Punisher, and Black Panther back into the spotlight with bold new takes. Kevin Smith and Joe Quesada's Daredevil run redefined Matt Murdock as a tragic, complex hero, and Garth Ennis' Punisher embraced dark humor and brutal storytelling. Christopher Priest's Black Panther was clever, political, and ahead of its time, the run that inspired the tone of the MCU film years later. And these books reminded fans that Marvel could still tell smart, grounded character-driven stories. Then came the Ultimate Universe in 2000, which was a total game changer. This was Marvel reintroducing Spider-Man, X-Men, and the Avengers, rebranded as the Ultimates, to a brand new generation, without decades of confusing continuity. Peter Parker was a modern teen. The X-Men felt fresh and edgy, and the Ultimates were written like a gritty blockbuster action film. This universe became insanely popular, so popular that Nick Fury was literally redesigned to look like Samuel L. Jackson, which the MCU would later copy exactly. This was also the era when new creative talent took over and reshaped Marvel. Brian Michael Bendis brought a noir sensibility to Daredevil and launched Ultimate Spider-Man, which became a huge hit. Mark Millar delivered political, violent takes on the Ultimates and Civil War, which was brewing at the time. Grant Morrison's new X-Men shook up the mutant status quo, giving the X-Men leather jackets and a more global, future-focused mission. Meanwhile, Marvel started dipping its toes into Hollywood, with X-Men and Spider-Man hit theaters and became box office smashes, showing that Marvel heroes could dominate outside of comics. This was the first step toward Marvel taking control of its own characters on film. The foundation for the MCU was quietly being built behind the scenes. By the mid-2000s, Marvel had regained its footing. The combination of Marvel Knights' prestige storytelling and the Ultimate Universe's fresh reboot made Marvel exciting again. Readers had options, the classic 616 continuity or the sleek, modern Ultimate line. With creators energized and the movies taken off, Marvel was positioned for its biggest leap yet, and eventually the birth of the MCU that would change superhero media forever. The Event Era. By 2005, Marvel realized that readers loved seeing the entire universe collide, so they went all in on line-wide events. These weren't just small team-up stories, they were giant crossover epics that touched every major hero, shook up the status quo, and often ended with a completely different Marvel universe. Events became the backbone of Marvel storytelling, and if you weren't reading them, you were missing the big picture. The first big one was House of M, where Scarlet Witch rewrote reality and gave us the heartbreaking moment, no more mutants. Overnight, the mutant population dropped from millions to just 198. This was Marvel saying, yeah, we're not afraid to make permanent changes. It set the tone for a decade where nothing and no one felt safe. Then came Civil War in 2006, probably the most famous Marvel event of all time. Iron Man and Captain America faced off over the Superhuman Registration Act, forcing every hero to pick a side. Spider-Man unmasked in front of the world, friendships shattered, and Cap ended up assassinated at the end of it all. This wasn't just a fun crossover, it was Marvel taking its characters to the absolute breaking point. As soon as Civil War wrapped, Marvel dove into Secret Invasion, revealing that Skrulls had been secretly replacing heroes for years. Trust between characters was shattered even further. Then Norman Osborn, yes, the Green Goblin, took over as the lead of global security in Dark Reign. For a while, the villains were running the Marvel Universe, a bold move that kept fans glued to the books. This whole era was basically one escalation after another. Siege ended Norman Osborn's reign, Fear itself unleashed Gods of Fear on Earth, and Avengers vs. X-Men pitted Marvel's two biggest teams against each each other over the Phoenix Force. These events weren't just action spectacles, they reshaped teams, killed off big characters, and changed who the major players were in the universe. Everything built up to Secret Wars 2015, where the entire Marvel multiverse was destroyed and rebuilt by Doctor Doom, wielding godlike power. This event let Marvel merge characters from different realities, like Miles Morales from the Ultimate Universe, into the main timeline, and hit the reset button on years of messy continuity. It was the perfect grand finale for Marvel's event-driven decade and the start of something completely new. The Legacy and Diversity Era. After Secret Wars 2015 blew up and remade the multiverse, Marvel relaunched nearly every title under the all-new, all-different Marvel banner. It wasn't just a marketing slogan. Marvel was ready to completely reimagine who held the spotlight. This was the beginning of an era focused on legacy characters, fresh faces, and giving the next generation of heroes a chance to shine. One of the biggest moves Marvel made was passing the mantles of its most iconic heroes. Jane Foster became the new Thor, wielding Mjolnir with an incredible run that was emotional, tragic, and badass. Sam Wilson took over the Shield as Captain America, exploring what it means for a black man to carry that symbol. Amaris Cho became the new Hulk, and even characters like Wolverine and Hawkeye were replaced by younger successors. This era also introduced fan-favorite original characters who quickly became household names, like Kamala Khan aka Miss Marvel, who exploded in popularity with her heartwarming, relatable story as a Muslim teenager superhero. Miles Morales fully joined Earth 616 after coming over from the Ultimate Universe, becoming Spider-Man alongside Peter Parker, and Rhea Williams debuted as Ironheart, stepping into Tony Stark's shoes as a young genius building her own armor. Marvel made a huge effort to reflect the diversity of its readers. Characters of color, LGBTQ+ heroes, and women took center stage in ways they hadn't before. Books like Black Panther, America starring America Chavez, and Mighty Thor gave readers stories with more cultural and social depth than ever, and this era brought in new audiences and made Marvel's universe feel bigger and more inclusive. Of course, not everyone was on board. Some fans loved seeing new characters get the spotlight, while others felt Marvel was pushing too much change too quickly, sidelining their favorite classic heroes. Sales were mixed, some of these runs became instant classics, others fizzled out fast. But whether people loved it or hated it, everyone was talking about Marvel again, and that's exactly what they wanted. By 2018, Marvel decided to dial things back with the Fresh Start initiative, returning many original heroes to their mantles. Thor Odinson reclaimed Mjolnir, Tony Stark came back as Iron Man, and Bruce Banner returned as the Hulk. But the legacy characters didn't disappear. Many of them are still major players today. The modern era and the MCU age. Like I mentioned, in 2018, Marvel hit the reset button with the Fresh Start initiative. Creative teams were shuffled, new issues launched across the board, and the focus shifted back to the classic heroes like Iron Man, Thor, Hulk, and Cap, while still keeping legacy characters like Kamala Khan, Miles, and Jane Foster active. It was Marvel's way of balancing nostalgia with the modern lineup they'd built over the past decade. The biggest game changer came in 2019 with Jonathan Hickman's House of X, Powers of X. This completely reinvented the X-Men mythos. Mutants united on the living island of Krakoa, declared themselves a sovereign nation, and began resurrecting fallen mutants, meaning that basically stopped being permanent for them. This wasn't just a status quo shift, it was a full-on cultural and political revolution for mutant kind. For a while, it felt like every X-Men title was must-read material. Of course, Marvel still loves its big events, and this era delivered some wild ones. War of the Realms was a Thor-centered epic bringing Asgardian war to Earth, King in Black saw Null and a literal army of symbiotes invade, and AXE Judgment Day pitted the Avengers, X-Men, and Eternals against each other. These events kept the universe feeling connected, but they also explored heavy themes like morality, godhood, and what makes a hero worth saving. Cosmic Marvel has stayed strong, with books like Eternals, Guardians of the Galaxy, and Immortal Thor. Meanwhile, street-level heroes like Daredevil, Moon Knight, and Punisher have gotten some of their best runs in years, bringing back the gritty, grounded Marvel vibe. At the same time, the MCU has become a pop culture juggernaut, influencing the comics more than ever. Characters like Shang-Chi, Scarlet Witch, and Loki got massive boosts in their comic books presence thanks to their movie and TV show popularity. Designs and personalities in the comics often match their MCU counterparts now, making the whole Marvel brand feel more unified than ever. And just when fans thought they'd seen it all, Marvel relaunched the Ultimate Universe in 2024, a brand new continuity with fresh takes on Spider-Man, Black Panther, Iron Man, and the Avengers. It's a modernized, accessible starting point for new readers, much like the original Ultimate line was in the 2000s. Right now, Marvel is experimenting with both its classic universe and its reimagined one, meaning we're in one of the most exciting and predictable periods Marvel has had in years.